guys. It is literally the end of the month. Okay, so I'm starting on this screen today because I wanted to go through the chapters that you were supposed to have read. Um, Today, I've started us off with the grammar review. So if you have not already been able to join quizzes, please do so. I will be doing grammar reviews for the rest of the week, each day hosting a live game so you have opportunity just to review some of the skills that we've already learned. Okay, so this is kind of cool because it goes chapter by chapter. I was going to do a chart, but I figured I'd just provide the summary here and then you wouldn't have anything to worry about. Okay, so chapter 4 you should have read. It is titled, and this is because I didn't provide you one from the previous time. Chapter 4 is The Village, and it goes through some of the traditions and norms of Malala's family. So, chapter 4 starts off with who Malala is in relation to her grandparents. Remember her, Raul is her grandfather. So it says at the beginning, Malala's parents noticed that she had the qualities of both of her grandfathers. Like Raul, she was vocal, and like Tor, Pikaya's grandfather, who died before she was born, she was calm and wise. Malala loved to spend time with her grandfather because by this time he was a lot older and he was nicer to her compared to the dad, and he would sing to her. She also looked forward to the Ed holidays, which was a biannual celebration of Abraham's sacrifice to God, the founding event of monotheism. Malala and her family would walk many miles to Barkana, a neighboring village, and Malala savored the sights of trees and animals while they walked. Occasionally, she would see a plane or helicopter flying high above the ground. Malala believes that it was her father who gave her a love for nature. And they talk a little bit about that at the beginning, where her father kind of verbally talks about his dismay with people who are destroying the earth. Malala notes that while she's proud to be a Pashtun culture has a lot to answer for when it comes to the treatment of women. So she starts to really dig into the cultural differences between women and men. Growing up, she couldn't help but notice that women were often beaten by their husbands or even kidnapped. There is a Pashtun custom called Sawara, whereby two groups can settle a feud by exchanging women. So Malala complained about Sawara to her father, who agreed with her that the custom was barbaric, but added that women were better off in Pakistan than in Afghanistan. Malala, encouraged by her father, read European books like Anna Karenina and Pride and Prejudice. Okay, the analysis of this. So the way that these summaries work is that I am providing you with a summary and then a quick analysis. So I already kind of talked about the fact that Malala's grandfather, her father's father, had changed by the time that she got older. So they pointing that out is significant because of the different relationships that she has presented throughout the book, that her grandfather had. So, excuse me. So, for example, how Raul was with his son was very different from how he was with Malala. And I think that's the reason why she mentions the background history with her relationship with him. Also says from an early age, Malala is conscious of being different from the people around her. Unlike the vast majority of her relatives, she reads books and celebrates women's rights to education and equality. At the same time, Malala feels an unshakable sense of connection to her community, both to the people who don't like her at all and to the land itself. These early chapters of Malala's life have an almost mythical tone to them. She seems like a child of the valley tied to her people by an almost supernatural bond. Malala confronts the paradox of her existence in this final section. She feels boundless love for her friends, her neighbors, and her community, but she also can't force herself to respect a culture that treats women as second-class citizens or even as currency. Malala will return to this paradox many times in this book. Whenever she feels especially close to Pakistan, some event will remind her that her home is still in many ways foreign to her. Because remember, because of her father and his recognition of the importance of education, she has a whole different foundation compared to other women who didn't even have the opportunity to study. Chapter 5, a little bit different. I'm not going to go into chapter 6 yet because I'm assuming that a lot of you have not finished reading this. So I'll add chapters. I'm going through the book. Sorry about that. Chapters 6 through 8 will be their own cluster because that completes part 1 of the book before the Taliban. So, Chapter 5. As a child, Malala gained a reputation for being highly intelligent in her classes. She participated in almost every student activity, sports, theater, and music. One year, a new student named Malaka Noor appeared in her class and quickly began doing better than Malala on her exams. Malala was at first shocked that anyone could upstage her. Also, around this time, Malala's family moved to a different house and she befriended a girl in her neighborhood named Safina. One day, Malala discovered that her toy telephone had gone missing, and she suspected Safina of stealing it. In response, Malala stole Safina's jewelry and then quickly developed a bad habit of stealing from others. One day, a few months after Malala developed her habit of stealing, her cousins confronted her. They explained that they knew about her misdeeds and couldn't believe that she was a thief. Ever since this unpleasant confrontation, Malala has refused to lie or steal. To this day, she claims she feels guilty for stealing as a child and prays to God for forgiveness. Malala's guilt makes her question Pashtun custom. The Pashtun custom, Pashtuns believe that every mistake must be corrected with a punishment, just as every good deed must be reciprocated with an equally good one. Malala has always been skeptical of this idea. She thinks it leads to an endless cycle of misdeed and revenge. It's better to learn to forgive others, she concludes. But I mean, all of it. I remember my brother as a kid. He probably would kill me for saying this. He stole from the store, and for like I think 2 years, my uncle shamed him by calling him Sticky Fingers, and I think he got a whooping or something. But I think he quickly learned that stealing was not for him. I think as kids they go through different phases, or as kids it's likely for someone to go through those kinds of phases. So um, I don't know if it would have been. I think I agree with Malala on this one that punishing her in this situation might not have helped because it probably would have been something she grew out of. One of Malala's important influences, she explains, was the philosopher Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan, whom she read from an early age. Khan, a disciple of Gandhi, believed that nonviolence was the only moral way to live one's life. Khan was also skeptical of the value of revenge, a skepticism that Malala shares. So that's why she felt that way. Chapter 5 was kind of long, so I had to break it up. As Malala grew up, Pakistan entered a period of political instability, which she hinted at the beginning of the book. The country alternated between electing Benazir Bhutto and Nawaz Sharif as prime minister. Then General Pervez staged a military co-op and seized power. In all, he spent 7 years as a dictator. Remember that Pakistan has a dictatorship and not a democracy, which means that they have one body that makes the decisions as opposed to the people having decision-making opportunities. Um, Despite repeatedly promising to step down very soon. During this era, a succession of DC's deputy commissioners arrived in Swat in a supposed effort to bring prosperity to the region. None of these DCs succeeded. Indeed, they were more interested in lining their own pockets, and stealing Swati wealth. Malala, determined to be a moral person, spent much of her childhood running errands for other people. Malala looked up to an older girl at school whose name was Fatima. Fatima made speeches before hundreds of onlookers, usually in English. English, Malala notes, was the language of prestige and wisdom among Pakistan people. Eager to impress her father, Malala decided to enter a public speaking competition just as her father had done when he was a young man. The topic for the competition was Honesty is the Best Policy. Malala made a speech written by her father, as was the custom. When she made her speech before a large audience, she was extremely nervous. At the end of the competition, she came in second, and her best friend, Aniba, won. Malala wasn't hurt by her loss, as she remembered the words of Abraham Lincoln: teach him how to gracefully lose. She resolved to put all her effort into her speeches in the future and to speak from the heart. Okay. Oh, wait. Oh, all right. Now the analysis. Sorry. As we read, I am Malala. It's sometimes difficult to remember that Malala is only a young girl. Indeed, she's a small child for many chapters. I thought she was like an adult child. Have you ever met a kid that's like super smart and they're like 3? Well, this is what she reminded me of. So I'm not surprised that she has immaturity, but I also felt like she was very mature. So it says here Malala is apparently mature from a young age, and she also doesn't linger on the immature details of her life. This is a storytelling, and she can recant her story the way she wants to, even though it's based on her truths. It's her perception or her understanding of these truths. So, one exception to this rule arrives at the beginning of this chapter. It's almost refreshing after all the heady information in the previous chapters to see Malala being a kid and having flaws of her own, which is, I believe, why she put this stuff in there to show that even with the climate and the cultural changes going on in Pakistan, she was still a little girl trying to figure it out. This is one of the most important sections in the entire book. It's basically a creation myth in which it's explained how Malala becomes the living saint she's sometimes said to be. The implication of Malala's guilt and penance is that sin is its own punishment, and thus the Pashtun custom of harshly punishing every crime is outdated and actively harmful. Clearly, Malala is narrating the book as a young girl, but she's also been reading Khan for many years. So I don't know if she started reading that book prior to recanting this part of the story. Probably did because of the way she tells it. It's especially jarring to jump from Malala's moral epiphany to the moral degradation of Pakistan in Malala's early life. Malala has just established that the old doctrine of quid pro quo, an eye for an eye, is redundant and harmful. Here, then, we see this doctrine at its worst. The corrupt bureaucrats and government officials under Musharraf, sorry, I know I just butchered that, but that guy are only interested in favors and the quid pro quo of bribery and extortion, which were some of the elements that Malala's father faced when he was trying to keep his school up. Um, so these elements were part of the environment of Pakistan. They just weren't as pronounced, I guess, because they weren't a part of the government officials' way of doing things, like publicly. But I guess things became a little more public here with the dictator in charge. All of Pakistan suffers as a result. As Malala looks back on the major influences in her life, her father, her mother, Benazir Bhutto, Fatima, we begin to notice something. There's no reason why Malala had to imitate Fatima by making speeches of her own. She could have given up and never made a speech again. Similarly, Malala could have seen her father's eloquence and charisma as unattainable and thus been discouraged in developing her own charisma. In other words, the notion of a role model suggests that Malala is a product of her environment, someone responding to the influence of people around her. But I Am Malala also suggests that people have control over who their role models are. Because she self-selected her role model of her best friend, that indicates to you that this is who she wanted to admire. Malala isn't simply influenced by the people around her. She chooses to be influenced by them and takes actions of her own. Okay, so that wraps up the sections that I wanted to cover. What you should be doing, number one, make sure you finish the reading. You should be at the end of chapter 5, beginning of chapter 6. Use the audio. It works. After that, you should be able to do the questions, which I have merged between the two. Okie dokie. And for AP people, you have already finished chapters 1 through 5, so I will not give you another lecture soon. Okay, if you're watching this by accident. Have a great day.